The Dead Sea Scrolls, in my opinion, are the most fascinating and enlightening archaeological discoveries in history. I can't think of anything that compares to the discovery of 11 caves with thousands of manuscripts from over 2,000 years ago, with the special note that you have the presence of the Hebrew Bible among those manuscripts. The Dead Sea Scrolls are remarkable, with an equally remarkable discovery stories that come along with them that lead to hearsay, rumors, false tales, and important information that ends up getting neglected. Lexham Academic has a new 2025 release on the Dead Sea Scrolls entitled Lost Words and Forgotten Worlds by Andrew Perrin. And I think this book has something for everyone who is interested in the topic of the Dead Sea Scrolls, from the person who has been fascinated by them for years, read multiple books, listened to lectures, seen museum presentations, to the person who is more like, what exactly are the Dead Sea Scrolls? So, from the Dead Sea Scroll aficionado to the Dead Sea Scroll novice, I think everybody will find something fascinating in Lost Words and Forgotten Worlds. If I had to describe this book, I would picture it as the world's best museum tour for viewing the Dead Sea Scrolls. Andrew Perrin is an excellent museum guide, as this book is filled with insight, humor, intrigue, and of course, since it's like a museum tour, it is filled with pictures. Wonderful pictures. I have not read a book since Borderland by Answers in Genesis where I appreciated the images so much. They really bring the journey to life. I had the privilege in 2018 to visit the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, where they house some of the original Dead Sea Scrolls. Sadly, they only have facsimiles on display now, but it was incredible to see them displayed right before me. But I gotta say, I learned way more reading Perrin's book. In fact, I would say if you have the opportunity to visit an exhibit where the scrolls are displayed, and they have those traveling exhibits that go various places around the world, you gotta read Perrin's book first to set the stage and allow you to truly appreciate what you are viewing. But me, I loved this book. And if you have a few more minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about Lost Words and Forgotten Worlds. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more reviews on books of biblical history, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my current book reviews. Also, like this video, share it with others to help more people know about the latest releases from Lexham Academic. In July of 2025, I will be teaching pastors in East Africa at the Grace Initiative for Burundi. Each year, Grace Life Ministries hosts a pastoral training for 100 to 120 pastors in Burundi. As one of the pastors, I will be walking pastors through the books of Hebrews and James to provide them with the tools they need to understand and teach these important books of the New Testament. And if you would like to support this pastoral training, please follow the link in the description, go to gracelife.org/give, and make a donation to help with the training of these local pastors in Africa. I really don't know how Perrin managed to cover as much ground as he does in this book, and to do it in such a way that hooks the reader as if you are reading an adventure tale, but Perrin manages to do it all. He provides a historical account of the discovery of the scrolls, along with what one would have found in those first caves. He also covers the false tales that have been built up around their discovery and the fascinating controversies around the Dead Sea Scroll forgeries. And I didn't expect the Hobby Lobby to come into play at that point, but they did. Who knew? He then provides us with an overview of the community of Qumran and the Essenes. This was the community who may have produced these scrolls. If they didn't produce them, they at least were the ones who stored them, although the discovery of what may have been a scriptorium to create and copy manuscripts strongly suggests that they created at least some of their own scrolls. Now, the first two-thirds of this book is this captivating tour through all the major background points and at times odd details that makes the Dead Sea Scrolls such a wonder. Then the final third of the book covers how the Dead Sea Scrolls have impacted our understanding of the Hebrew Bible. in places. I loved what he brought to light and how he pointed out places where the Dead Sea Scrolls have filled in some of the blanks that we had that were present before their discovery. And there were also some other places where I'd probably push back a little bit against how significant or impactful he made out some of these discoveries to be. But I believe here's the biggest impact of the Dead Sea Scrolls on the Hebrew Bible. I think the Dead Sea Scrolls made a clear point that most often the longer reading of a passage, if you're comparing two manuscripts, the one that's longer, the one that has an extra verse or an extra phrase or an extra word, if all other things are equal, you should prefer the longer reading. Your default view should be that a scribe is more likely to leave something out by mistake than they are to add something in that did not belong. For instance, the Dead Sea Scrolls restored the end of Psalm 145:13 with the phrase, "The Lord is faithful in all his words and gracious in all his actions." This phrase makes the verse much longer than what we had in the Hebrew text, and it also supports the Hebrew text that was an acrostic for Psalm 145, replacing that line that was missing in the Masoretic text. I also appreciate the addition of a paragraph at the end of 1 Samuel 10 on the Ammonites, putting out the eyes of the Gadites and Reubenites as it sets up the context of 1 Samuel 11. Is that paragraph original? Is it inspired? I'm not sure. Maybe someone added it on later on after 1 Samuel 11 to try to make sense of that context, but there should be an argument that it is genuine since the manuscript is so old, or it was added by someone who actually knew what happened in that historical narrative. And what we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls is not that scribes were adding here and there as they wanted to the narrative, but if anything, we had times where, yes, words or phrases were inadvertently dropped out. But when you look at the major places that Perrin draws attention to, those places where the text in the Dead Sea Scroll is markedly different from the Masoretic text that we use as the basis for our English Bibles, you don't see chunks of the narrative or laws being changed or left out. But what you find is a remarkable, I would say miraculously maintained, stable text. Even when he writes about different versions of Jeremiah, that doesn't surprise me because of the way Jeremiah came together. There could have been different copies where different portions or sections of Jeremiah were put together for storage or for sending out to someone else. And the same thing with different lists of Psalms that aren't the same as our final 150. I think Perrin views the text during this time period as more fluid than I think it would have, also based on seeing that through his examples that he brought out in this book. I view the Hebrew Bible still to be very stable, but it would have had different collections of Psalms or prophecies, and you would have expected some scribal errors. When I finished reading this book, I remain blown away by the Dead Sea Scrolls out as to how small the differences were between these ancient texts and the Hebrew texts that we've been using throughout church history. And it really highlights two things. First, the overall stability of the Hebrew Bible that was stable for centuries, and also that the longer reading of a passage is more likely to be correct. Now, the book ends with some writings about how Essene writings impact the background of the New Testament. So here's an example. What we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls was the oldest known reference to the phrase, the works of the law. And this is a big deal because Paul writes the whole book of Galatians to teach how and why we are not saved by the works of the law. So what did he mean by talking about these works of the law? The interesting thing is that for the Essenes, the works of the law are not limited to the Mosaic law, but the works of the law include calculations for the calendar, purity regulations developed for the community, their own definitions and interpretations on what purity is, and more. Lots of stuff not inspired in the Hebrew Bible. And this should key us in that Paul also probably would not limit the works of the law to the Mosaic law, but it is any practices that we think that we believe will make us pure before God. It could be works in the Mosaic Law or works that we invent ourselves. The overall point by Paul is that we are not saved by works of the law. We're not saved by doing works that we think make us pure before God. We're instead made saved through faith in Jesus Christ. Overall, this is one book that far surpassed my expectations, surpassed them by a mile. I've already read a few books on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've read articles. As I've said, I've visited the Shrine of the Book. So I kind of expected this book to be more of what I already knew. But I learned so much. And I'm sure you will too if you read Lost Words and Forgotten Worlds by Andrew Perrin.